It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Wind down includes aspects that help physiologically and psychologically. So yes, having a dark room for sleep is important, but starting to dim the lights in the household up to 2 hours before bedtime can help enormously.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
It's so ironic that today I'm having a conversation with two experts on sleep because for some reason, I have no idea why, but last night, let's just say I'm looking shabby this morning. I couldn't get to sleep until after midnight. I'm normally in bed by like 8:30 or 9 o'clock. I haven't had a shave because I've woken up feeling a little dusty, and I don't drink alcohol. There's no alcohol involved or anything like this. I just couldn't sleep last night. Today's podcast is not about me and sleep or you and sleep, although I think we'll probably pick up a few lessons, but we are talking to the authors of Generation Sleepless. Heather Turgeon and Julie Wright have written 3 books together. They're psychotherapists in the United States, one in LA, one in New York, and we're going to talk about what it is to help our kids to have healthy sleep when we're raising a generation of kids who, with the advent of screens, especially when they're sneaking them into their rooms, seem to have endless energy for staying up late at night. Julie and Heather, it's great to have you on the Happy Families podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Is this a new problem? I mean, when I think back to what I was like as a teenager, I never wanted to go to sleep. I wanted to stay up forever, and I kind of tried to a fair bit. Are we dealing with something specific and new to today's youth, or has this always been an adolescent issue?
It has been always an adolescent issue for decades, I would say. Since the 1990s, teens have been sleeping the worst of all of us. They are the most sleep-deprived age group of all of us. But their sleep has been going downhill ever since. So now with the advent of technology and early school start times and academic overload, pressure to get into college, the sleep of teenagers is being squeezed on both ends. We describe it in the book as a perfect storm. And yes, it is more acute now than ever before.
So you mentioned screens and technology in bedrooms. This is one of those things that parents of teenagers are going to be rolling their eyes and going, oh my goodness, it drives me up the wall. But it's not just teenagers either, right? I mean, little kids, they're on their screens playing with their games or listening to their meditation apps or whatever, and they're only 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years old. You've mentioned the academic pressure that's going on as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, but from my undergraduate psychology studies, I don't know how many years ago now, Julie, I have this vague recollection that teenagers are actually biologically wired to go to bed later and wake up later.
Absolutely. Yeah. Their sleep clock is naturally later. And this happens when puberty starts. So, we think of teenagers as just, reluctant to go to bed and just don't want to listen to us, but their sleep clocks are actually delayed. So they might be, in a natural state without technology and academic overload and all of that. They're going to be ready to go to sleep about 1 to 2 hours later than before this. So that's the first thing. And that's something we can't change. That's biological. But when you add to that piles of homework and you add too many activities that, preceded getting their homework done. And then you add to that the advent of technology, which takes that natural delay. All of those things take that natural delay and extend it even further, especially because at that point in the evening, they really want to have a little fun and connect with their friends. So it is a perfect storm, and it is a big problem.
Ladies, I have 6 daughters. My eldest she's moved out and married, and I've now got my 5th child entering adolescence. And so the kids, they're just getting going at 8:30. And we kind of look at them as parents and we're struggling to keep our eyes open. Our tempers are frayed. We're exhausted. We've got pressure about what's going to happen tomorrow. And we know that tomorrow morning the children are going to be hard to get out of bed because they're saying that it's 8:30 and they're not. I'm not tired, Dad. I don't need to go to bed yet. I could go for ages. And you're like, no, you can't go for ages. You're killing me. Talk to me about this Generation Sleepless challenge and what parents are supposed to do to navigate, whether they're teenagers or little kids. How do we get them into a healthy sleep routine, especially when they're so resistant?
So what you're describing is what we would call the second wind. And it really has an underlying biology to it, which is that your circadian system, the sleep clock that governs your sleep, it gives you a last boost of energy before your bedtime. So it's natural for kids to wind up before they wind down. That's really natural. But the other thing is that they are more susceptible because they have, because of the way their eyes are developing, because of their brains, they're more susceptible to light than we are. So light delays your sleep. And young adolescents are very susceptible to that delay. So melatonin is suppressed, drowsiness is suppressed much more easily than it is for us, which means, and sort of both of those things combined mean that having a wind down time is super important for all of us, but especially for older kids and young teenagers.
So can we unpack that a little more? Because everybody knows that we're supposed to wind down.
Yeah.
And as adults, we don't have any problem with that at all. We're ready to wind down from about 5 p.m., right? We're like, okay, let's slow things down. But the children, like you said, they get that energy burst. And let's be honest, a lot of mainly dads kind of see bedtime as an opportunity to rile the kids up a little bit. Let's have a wrestle, let's have a tickle, let's have some fun. If you were to put together and I know that there's going to be a lot of individual differences, but if you were to talk through some really useful wind down strategies, maybe for little kids and then for big kids, what would you suggest? Bearing in mind, of course, the sleep hygiene stuff like having a dark room and having not too much noise and the right temperature and all those kinds of things. What else would you put in there?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Wind down includes aspects that help physiologically and psychologically. So yes, having a dark room for sleep is important, but starting to dim the lights in the household up to 2 hours before bedtime can help enormously. It can help your kids actually feel sleepy as it gets closer to bedtime. So we help parents with, using lamps with dimmers and warm colored light bulbs, turning off bright overhead lights. If it's summer, you might be even closing some blinds or some curtains. So you're starting to simulate sunset. That helps release melatonin and prepare the body for sleep. So that's one aspect of wind down. For younger kids, wind down almost always includes turning screens off, all screens in the home, including moms and dads. Everybody screens for at least an hour before bedtime. And then another aspect of it for younger children is to just give them the feeling, and you can do this for teens too. I mean, if it's a family movement towards sleep, give them the feeling. I think it's easy when your kids are older and you definitely go to bed before they do, but just giving your kids the feeling that the whole household is winding down so they don't feel like they're missing out on something. That's hard with technology because they're getting all this input. So then the trick is to shift to doing something together as a family, maybe watching a TV show for 30 minutes, which is fine to do, or taking a walk with the dog or doing something together, or, letting them listen to some music or listen to an audiobook as they start to wind down. So there are tons of things, and every person has to find the wind down that works best for them.
It sounds idyllic. It's actually making me feel a little bit relaxed. I was speaking with Heather Turgeon and Julie Wright. They are the authors of The Happy Sleeper and a new book, Generation Sleepless, which has been out for just a few weeks now. Generation Sleepless helps us to uncover the greatest threats to our teenagers' physical and mental health around sleep deprivation. After the break, we're going to have a conversation about the New South Wales government's plans to rejig school start times for our teenagers to make life, apparently more flexible. It's a curious idea, and it's going to have an impact on the way kids respond to, or the way kids are getting their sleep. We need to understand that research. And I'm going to ask for some advice to find out if some of the advice that I've been giving is actually good advice at all, because these sleep experts probably know more about it than me. The 21st century is a tricky time to be a teen girl. Alcohol, drugs, mental health concerns, body image issues, technology, sex. Our daughters face all these and more. The Happy Families Misconnection Summit brings together the best modern-day experts on teen girls to show you how to stay connected with your daughter and help her face these challenges head-on. Available online via video at the Happy Families webshop. It's the Happy Families podcast, the podcast for the time poor parent who just wants answers now. We're talking about Generation Sleepless. What is going on with these kids who are so excited at bedtime with their screens and with their friends and with everything else that's going on that they just don't want to go to sleep? Heather Turgeon and Julie Wright are the authors of the bestseller, The Happy Sleeper, and Generation Sleepless is their latest book, looking at the latest scientific research around our most sleep-deprived population in human history, our teenagers. Julie and Heather, my question for you now revolves around a recent series of news articles over the last couple of months coming out of New South Wales, our most populous state here in Australia. The government, based on what's happened over the last 2 years with COVID, the government's starting to say we can make work more flexible, and school has not been rejigged for like 150, 200 years. I wonder what it'd be like if we started school earlier. So in Australia, we generally have high school starting somewhere between 8:30 and 9. That's pretty well standard. And they're talking about moving it forward. You talk in your book about a whole lot of research that suggests this may not be good for our kids. Can you help us to understand a bit more about that?
Yes, it is, because of what Julie was describing about the sleep clock of adolescence. It shifts later. So the melatonin, at a biological level, teenagers are not tired as early as they once were, and they are also not ready to wake up at a time that they once were. So having to wake up really early for school, it's almost an impossible math that we're expecting of them. And one of the dangerous things is that they miss the morning sleep time, which is when they have their dreams. It's when REM sleep occurs in the last 2 hours of the night, is when most of our dreaming happens. And that is extremely important for emotional health. So if we cut off that time, we are essentially cutting off, like what we call it, overnight therapy. We're cutting off that time. And because of what we've been describing, you can't just tell your teenager to go to bed extra early to make up for that sleep. So early school start times are really, really robbing teenagers of valuable brain construction time and really important sleep. So here, the American Academy of Pediatrics here recommends 8:30 or later for high school. And there are different states that are trying to make that shift to 8:30. But that is kind of the earliest that you can reasonably expect most teenagers to be able to get 8 hours of sleep, let's say, on average.
I'd love to explore something around this because to me, it's logical, even though you've just refuted it. It's logical to say, well, if you need to get that number of hours of sleep, let's just bring your sleep earlier. Let's get you up 2 hours earlier, which means that tomorrow, and this is kind of the question that I wanted to ask anyway about the advice that I give to parents. When their kids just won't get up because they just won't go to sleep, the advice that I'll often give is, so let's just let them know they can stay up as long as they want, but they still have to get up at 7 o'clock, for example, or 6:30 or whatever time it is. If you know that you've got to get up at that hour and you are expected to get up and not be grumpy and not make the whole house miserable because we've gotten you up because we said 7 o'clock is wake up time, what I would imagine should happen is that the kid's body clock will reset over a period of 2, 3, 4 days, where if you're getting them up at 7 o'clock every day, even if they are staying up to midnight or 1 or 2, because you've decided not to force them to go to bed, within 2 or 3 days, they will be exhausted and they will be ready to go to bed at 9 o'clock, which means that the next morning they'll wake up at 7, and then, hey presto, their body clock is back on song and everything's working right. You're laughing at me while I'm saying this, but it makes logical sense, right?
It makes logical sense when you think about how we adjust to jet lag when we change time zones and how our bodies do adjust over time.
Great example, yeah.
But the problem with teenagers is this biological sleep phase delay combined with their academic overload and their technology use, and the fact that teenagers can absolutely survive and function. They're not functioning well and they're not feeling great, but they can function on way less than optimal sleep. The reason we wrote the book was because we uncovered a really alarming crisis where teenagers, something like 90% are getting way less sleep, like 2 hours a night, less sleep than they need. And it's not a coincidence that anxiety and depression are on the rise, at least in our country. I think it's true around the world. So it's really not something to, in our opinion, to even contemplate making school start times earlier. If you guys have this around 8:30 start time, you're in good shape. This country is trying so hard to turn that around because our teens are really suffering. It's a crisis. And if only that would convince them to go to bed at a reasonable time. It doesn't work that way for teenagers.
Yeah, fascinating. If parents sort of going, well, how many hours? My kids are functioning fine on 6.5, 7 hours sleep a night. They're working hard, they're committed, they're having fun with their friends, they're doing all the right stuff, but they're getting 6 or 7 hours sleep a night. Is that enough? Are they supposed to be getting more? What do you think, based on the American Academy of Pediatrics and all of the other scientists that are out there making noise about this, what would you say parents need to know around the amount of sleep those kids need to be getting?
Well, first of all, it's really good to know that during the teenage years, an enormous amount of restructuring and remodeling is going on in the brain. And it's actually a time when they need a lot more sleep than people think. So teenagers sleep an average of about 9.25 hours in a natural setting with no artificial cues. So what we write in the book is we would love to see all teenagers get at least 8 hours, but the optimal is about 9.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Well, what a delightful and an important conversation. Thank you so much to the two authors of Generation Sleepless, Heather Turgeon and Julie Wright. If you'd like more info about their book, we will link to it in the show notes. Ladies, thanks so much for the great work that you've done. And I hope that this book is able to reach and help so many parents of kids who just need that little extra shut-eye.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
The Happy Families podcast, as always, is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. And for more info on making your family happier, you can pick up Heather and Julie's books, The Happy Sleeper and Generation Sleepless. That's their latest one, from wherever your favourite bookseller exists. And you can also visit happyfamilies.com.au for more.